We'll be checking in to make sure you guys can hear us as well. So maybe if you can't hear us, just give a little wave or something. We're recording this as well. So if you guys want to come back to it later, we'll also share the recording of it. Yeah, first of all, welcome. Thank you guys all so much for coming out. A few familiar faces, a few new faces. But the goal of today is to give everyone an update on a project that directly impacts this community, the Jones Bar FireWise community, called the Sierra Foothill Forest Climate Resilience Project. Give an update for those who are familiar with the project, kind of an introduction for those of you who aren't familiar with it, share really where we're at in the permitting process, and then also really the goal today is to talk about how to increase engagement across this community. This is first and foremost a community-driven project. Where the more people we have on board, the more properties, the more we can actually address forest health and fire concerns on a landscape scale. As we all know, fires ignore property boundaries. So ensuring that we're all kind of on board together is the key to successful next steps here. So a brief introduction. I'm Jeff Lauder. I'm the Executive Director of Sierra Streams Institute. I am originally a forest ecologist, background in research in forest response to stress in tropical environments in the Sierra Nevada, fire, drought, all those kinds of things. And then came back to Nevada County with my wife after living here 10 years ago and rejoined the Sierra Streams Institute, where I worked with in the past. I'll introduce the organization in a second. But now I've taken over the ED role. And again, because I'm originally a forest ecologist, we have a wide range of number of projects, but this is the kind of project that really, I think, speaks to me and my involvement in the community. Yeah.
There's some people here to speak about this.
Okay, thank you. So first, I'll introduce you to Erin. She's our forest intelligence.
So I started at Sierra Streams Institute about 6 months ago, and I'm originally from Wisconsin, actually, the cheese state. The original cheese state, and so I have a Bachelor of Science there in Milwaukee, and then Master of Science in Environment and Natural Resources from Ohio State. And I was fortunate to be a crew the Stanislaus, Loomis, and El Dorado National Forests, and really grew to love Northern California. So when I was a forester with the state of Utah, I jumped at the opportunity to take this role on, and I'm really stoked to be here, to be working with communities and also including forest health.
Yeah, so Sierra Streams Institute, we are primarily what we call community-based participatory research organization. So everything we do is focused on community-driven projects where we do research that is conducted by, based on the concerns of, and with data collected by the community. So it's through volunteering, internships, those kinds of things. And really, that's kind of one of the underlying things of this project here. The Sierra Foothill Forest Climate Resilience Project is a project funded by the Wildlife Conservation Board, state of California. So really to point out there, the funding structure and kind of the background of this project, it is being funded by Wildlife Conservation Board. This is funded under their forest health program that is focused on fuel reduction, but also focused on all aspects of forest health. So that's something that's really important to point out. And as we'll touch on a couple of times throughout this discussion today, you know, fire and forest health, part of the same thing. You can't really separate the two. So thinking of just fuels treatment as forest health is not necessarily true. We have to look at all aspects of forest health, including post-treatment health and other impacts from treatments or non-treatment. So the funding that we have from Wildlife Conservation Board is in 2 phases. So we currently are in phase 1, which is a planning phase. So planning is, you know, the unfortunate hoops that we all have to jump through for doing landscape scale projects. We're to complete CEQA, California Environmental Quality Act, permitting, and basically ensure that any projects that are done at the landscape scale are not impacting cultural, biological, and other resources. So we're in that phase right now. We're in the planning phase. We're already collecting a lot of data for that planning phase, but there's some gaps based on land ownership throughout the region that we'll talk about in a little bit. And the next part about this funding structure, though, is phase 2, the actual implementation is all but guaranteed, essentially, as we reach the end of phase 1. So this is something we want to point out that we're excited about, is that the way this is set up is as long as we're on track to complete the planning phase, phase 2 funds will come through. But we need more community engagement to actually get the total amount of funding that's needed. So we know exactly what we're treating where, at what scale, what the cost of that is to then pitch for phase 2. We'll come back to that in a little bit. So some background on the project. We just do arrows or we have to click here. This is the scope of the project. So first and foremost, as you see here, all of your properties in the Jones Bar FireWise community. The Woolman School, which the polygons here are a little bit off, there's actually additional properties that are not Woolman that are marked in red, but all the properties around Woolman. Medina City School of the Arts and Shady Creek Outdoor School. This property is actually no longer involved, but they are still communicating and kind of other landscapes too. So really large landscape and some of the background and kind of emphasis here. For those of you who don't know, Syracuse Institute used to have an office here on the Woolman campus, and we lost it in the Jones fire. We actually had applied for this funding prior to the Jones fire, and then just got granted the funds right before the fire hit. So it's kind of one of those ironic, unfortunate scenarios where we had pitched forest management in the region right before that lightning magnetic fire in August of 2020. We then kind of pivoted a little bit to shift the project to focus on post-fire management and then as well as continued forest management beyond the Jones fire scar. So the way that this is set up from a permitting perspective, Erin will talk a bit more about kind of where we are, the agency type stuff in a little bit. But there are 3 school properties that we're already conducting surveys at, and that is a School of the Arts, Woolman, and Shady Creek. And then the rest of the properties is where the community engagement comes in. Through either granting us access to do surveys on your property, or even actually working with us to be trained up to do your own surveys if you would like to. The school properties are also working with an education project funded through the National Science Foundation called Our Forests. And that is a project where we're developing curriculum for 3rd through 5th grade students to learn about forest health. And so the students in classes at the Medina School of the Arts and a couple other schools that come to Woolman are actually collecting real data on forest health that then feeds back into the management plan. So all of this is connected, where it's kind of a combination of education programs, outreach to local students, as well as then developing the forest management plan for the whole region you guys are in. Just a little bit of kind of landscape scale context again, as many of you know, your FireWise community is immediately adjacent to state parkland and BLM land. We have had a few preliminary conversations with state parks. There are some unfortunate boundaries there that we'll talk a little bit about maybe to treatment, but we do have partners at the BLM to also try to address these parcels as we get into the implementation phase, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. And then just kind of giving some fire hazard severity context. Most of the community here, as you are all aware, is in what we call the wildland urban interface, and is in a high and very high fire hazard severity zone, kind of as shown by Jones fire and other fire likelihoods. Yeah.
Like over the red neighborhood, is that from treatment would have been done or?
One thing that I'd like to point out about these maps is that, yeah, this is kind of, it's modeled essentially. So it's based on, spatial data on vegetation, assumed prior treatments, those kinds of things. So it could be from prior treatments. It could just be that the spatial data for that area shows a different vegetation type, different fuel type. So there's a number of things, yeah.
Okay, I have a question about the PowerPoint program. Is it going to be available to us?
Yeah, I can show the slideshow. Absolutely.
What the question?
The slideshow, we can make this available to everyone. So, and just a quick check-in. Can you guys see the screen, or is it kind of too far away for the Zoom call?
Cannot see it.
It's a little it's
Okay.
fuzzy, so making the
Okay.
slideshow available would be great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so we'll definitely share the slideshow after. So thank you guys for sorry about that, but yeah, we'll share the slideshow. I'm actually wondering, let's just do yeah, exactly. We'll just share the screen here. There we go. Cool. So
Great, thank you.
So to give the context, again, kind of on fire history and fire ecology of our area, and again, emphasis for this project. This is fire history in our region going back about 125 years. There's a couple fires missing from this, but it's pretty comprehensive. And so, as you can tell, the region of where the Jones fire was the Nevada City region and Grass Valley region, haven't burned in over 125 years. We know from things like tree ring records and other records what our fire return interval is. That's the gap of time between fires burning across this landscape. That our fire return interval here is anywhere from 2 to 10 years. So historically, remember the Sierra Nevada, we like to say the sportsman fire. It needs fire to be a healthy forest. That's what clears gaps to allow the trees to germinate, clears out fuels. It kind of was self-regulating before we came in and started this wildland urban interface area. And our fires interval of 2 to 10 years with an average of about 7 years. We got away from that through our history of fire suppression. So as fires have burned across the landscape, the old Forest Service policy, we call it the 10 a.m. policy. Where they used to put out fires before 10 a.m. the next day, didn't allow fires to consume fuels. We then also know there's a history of cultural burning in the region for the past 11 to 12,000 years, or even longer, where it burns to increase oak sprouts, increase forage for deer, increase openings for deer. Those kinds of things were done every year, every 2 years, every 5 years. So really our region has a fire debt of 10 to 100 years. What that means is that's all fuel that's built up that now we try to address through mechanical treatment. So we try to remove those fuels manually to kind of mimic what fire would or should do in the region. We can't necessarily keep up with the pace and scale that we need to at this point.
That like bigger than there.
Yeah, exactly. So this is the 49 fire. So the actually going away. The actually fade. Yeah, I don't want it. Again, I thought that's here for some reason. But yes, the colors of the fires essentially are the warmer the color, the longer it's been since the fire. The greener the color, the more recent it was. And then just as a reminder, I won't go into too much detail here, but as a refresher, we had talked about this before. The other thing that we're trying to do in this project is learn from the Jones Fire. So we've conducted some analyses on fire severity of the Jones Fire to basically learn what drove fire severity and have that influence proposed treatments that we can work with you guys on across the landscape. This is a fire severity map using what's called reflectance data. So it's wavelengths of light reflected back to a satellite at a 10-meter scale. And that is essentially tells us things like change in vegetation, change in ash cover, change in leaf greenness, all those kinds of things. And we did some models to try to basically look at what of all of these predictors, canopy cover, changing canopy cover, so even treatment impacts. And then something called heterogeneity, which is how clumpy the forest is. Is it just one kind of uniform forest, or is there gaps in the forest? What drove severity? And what we learned from this analysis was that in the Jones Fire, like many other fires across California, this pattern is being shown over and over and over, is that increased heterogeneity means lower severity. So this means increased clumpiness. And the reason this is really important for discussions with you guys about proposed treatments is just to point out that there's such a focus, obviously, on things like ladder fuels, and ladder fuels are the understory fuels that carry fire from the ground into the canopy. There's a couple of reasons for that. The main reason is feasibility. It's easier to take like a masticator and just kind of cover large areas and remove all the fuel. But also there's permitting restrictions on removing large trees and those kinds of things. All of the data time and time again is showing us that if you have more breaks, basically across the forest, more gaps, you have higher resilience to fire, so post-fire recovery is better, and you have changes in severity and decreases in severity. So this is a really important point that we're going to talk about relative to proposed treatments, because things like fuel breaks and understory treatment are really good for agency access, for thinking of like where fire agencies might tie in a fire line, ingress and egress, so evacuation routes. But if you have a fire that's already carrying into the canopy, and you remove just the understory, that fire is still going to continue to carry across the canopy. We'll show you an example of that. So really important consideration is when we think of treatments, we do, unfortunately, some people don't like it, have to think the way a fire would think, or treat the way a fire would treat, which is occasionally it's going to kill a big tree, take down a big tree, occasionally it's going to make a gap. We have to kind of think the way a fire would go when carrying across a landscape.
Okay, so this feeds into recommended treatments for this area. And so Steve Graydon, he is a individual who works with SimTable, and SimTable does modeling for hazards, so flooding, fire, atmospheric particles, all sorts of things. And he incorporates that model to develop prescribed fire recommendations. So this is a proposed burn unit for this campus for Woolman. It's not far from here at all. It's 8 acres. And so just for context, so this is Jones Bar Road and this is Woolman. And so, yeah, it's just over that way is actually the beginning of where this prescribed burn is posed. And so it's treatments such as these that we can recommend for the Jones Bar community potentially. And actually, this incorporates some of the previous burn from the Jones fire. And that was a little lower to moderate severity, and so it could probably withstand yet another burn. And so Steve also developed a visualization for us, which I think is helpful for you all to sort of envision what a fire could look like.
Hello, and welcome to this incredible demo video.
Right, it's all back for me, yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so Steve developed this for us, and it's specific to the Jones Bar community. And so please keep in mind that this is a model. So it's not incorporating information like relative humidity or temperature at this time, but it's a projection based on climatic information from like July and August, when the fire is most likely to occur here. And so he does a few simulations, as you'll hear and see in this. So he'll show us what fire could look like if it started to the northwest with a southwesterly wind. And so a northerly wind and a southwesterly wind, those are both quite likely wind events to occur here based on what happened with the Jones fire. And so you'll see that, and we'll also see simulation for what the fire could look like if it started at a power line to the east, and then also what the fire spread could look like if you incorporated a 40 to 50% fuel reduction. So.
And so, yeah, I have to point out one of the reasons I want to show you this, like she said, it is just a model. It is, one of the better models that we have available, but it's to show, how spread might occur at the landscape scale, to imagine, where our properties are here within this simulation and how we can place treatments relative to fire spread in the region. So it's more of a tool to try to plan ahead for where fires might potentially start.
We might want to turn the volume on this.
Yeah, see if everyone can hear it.
Something demo video. For this, we're just going to take Luke's basic stuff here and do some runs in the fire area. For this, we have an elevation map where the violet red, you'll see in the South Haven River represents the lowest point, and the red and orange at the bottom. Right hand side is the highest scenarios here, slightly from older and second rows. There has been
It's not very loud. That's okay. We'll kind of talk over it as he gets going.
Next. The winds, northern winds will predominate.
So he's just mentioning what we said before, the two most common winds, and fire season here, southwesterly and northerly. The Jones fire was a northern wind event. That's kind of the common conditions. So here you're doing an emission off of southwest.
Don't have the road name right in front of me, but essentially larger.
And he's saying here, he's not pointing to blame, not saying this was a likely ignition source, just putting a random start.
Really
Do a couple
here
here.
was the type that will start, but having the fire out of there. With the influence of that southwesterly wind, approximately.
So again, what this model allows us to do is to visualize a combination of topography, wind, and fuel. So there you see a data little back run. So that was based on slope and fuel type in that region. So that helps us set in that area. We can extend the range to reduce that run.
By updating the line side,
It's working straight to 49.
so this is right. The river to restore it.
As the fuels. Is there a question, Matt?
We're still investigating like that, to where.
Yeah. I think the other products.
Trees we use.
So you see it does start to flow down around here, it's fire to get your fuel bags. So Roger there.
Jones fire.
And then he's showing the mission over here where the Jones fire starts along the power line.
So bringing power lines here, we've got a reasonable suspicion that something could happen. Potentially, hopefully not, a lot of changes to infrastructure to improve that. But we can select a few different types of maps here to represent, give us some information of what we're seeing on the ground here. And give us a very brief elevation.
You can see as it burns into the Jones star, it slows down quite a bit. It was one of those things that, like you said, the fire depth here, it was clear, what fire burns. To reduce its transmission across the landscape, you can benefit the slope of unburned and makes a lot of sense.
Crescent shape there, I quickly added that and slowly back down the slope towards the end.
And yeah, this is that going down, the hill,
where it goes more slowly, and it's going outside.
So it was spread here, this is then, but also, definitely topography having some influences there.
And he does say that this is about 500 to 1,000 times as fast as you would expect the fire actually.
Again, we're gonna take a look.
So 15 minutes here, there's a couple different simulations, and we'll show you this in a second. These are all still untreated, so just current conditions. And we're gonna show you.
The fire.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm just wondering where on the river.
that's kind of the DLM actually. DLM.
Yeah.
The fire out here, so this
This way.
topography.
Yeah.
We're gonna do that. Varies essentially.
Did it stop the share? Sorry, guys.
And looking to level fire. Time escape, I want to say 2000.
So this is the logo fire, and so this is the actual fire scar, and this is the model.
Which fire is it?
Logo.
Logo.
Have impacted down as well as something with areas.
And so this model does incorporate fire suppression efforts too, so you'll see the blue is actually a bit wider than what they anticipated, but
This gives you a sense for, okay, yeah, it seems they sort of accurately predicted the direct.
Suppressive action, so
flows.
I think we can see.
So we're going down slope and down canyon. So topography is kind of fighting against it during the fuel replacement.
It was from.
You can share.
Time or this to.
Yeah.
And data was gathered.
And that is this chill type map.
So they say that.
Fuel type.
Drainage area.
So it's basically, I think it's like a land fire fuel model. So the colors represent actual fuel model types. So there's like these codes form, where it's kind of like pine dust.
Some treatments, the way you see, we do some hypothetical fuels treatments and we.
Right, so yeah, logo fire, not the predicted.
And that was because of the suppression.
Right.
So now he's resetting it to then apply fuel treatments. And the main thing here is you'll probably notice it doesn't actually look that different. And this is one of the things we really want to point out. Is their slow spread and severity, but it's not going to stop. That's what we're doing. We're not showing suppression. We're trying to. Exactly.
Yeah.
Percent max.
And then you have more.
Some of these areas.
So these are essentially, we'll pause it for a second.
Available here, so take out 100% down to 60% and also.
So what he's saying there is what we overlaid, we sent him, we had actually already discussed with a few of you guys prior, some fuel break ideas that you had tossed out. We looked at some other fuel break ideas that would go, connecting certain properties, just based on where we're looking at some things. And then there's also just kind of some spot treatments, doing heterogeneous treatments to reduce fuel. So everything that you're seeing here, this is Jones Fire Star, and these are all treatment areas across this landscape. And we're essentially starting at right near one of those fuel breaks.
What does this gold lines represent?
These are essentially fuel breaks.
Fuel break.
Yeah. So it's essentially saying that if we put a break across here or a break down there, how would that actually change fire? This one? Yeah. I'm not sure if the actual specific locations are. You guys would know better than us.
Oh,
Yes. It's a fuel break, so some of them are based on roads and some of them are just applying a break across the landscape. So sometimes we would take a road and basically expand the fuel break on either side of the road, and sometimes we just put a break across the picture.
Exactly, the bar can go through, you see the bowl when it's going down, and then it takes a 90 to the right. That's the bottom of Jones Bar, in my opinion, right at the curve where you get the great overlook at the river, and then you just go boom right in. Yeah. So that would be Jones Bar Road.
Yeah.
To the river. Yep. As a reference.
Yeah. So it's just saying a combination of, clearance on either side of roads, as well as fuel breaks, and then as well as spot treatments. And the spot treatments he applies here in the model, you can hear it when you watch the video on your own. He says we're reducing fuels by about 40 to 50%. So if we set it at 100%, or whatever it currently is, and reduce it down to about 60% fuel conversion.
But it's the same logic that the Jones Bar Road is located, you can break into the left or the west, then that coming to the west, that would be probably the gate, I'm just assuming this is the gate that presently exists. It says no parking, whatnot, and this is the original Creek Road to the river and trout line. I'm thinking, I think that is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you progress during the process.
And so it's
Yeah.
downward.
This one? I wouldn't know. I didn't make this one. Steve made the plan. So again, it's hypothetical treatments.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so this is exactly why we want to include you guys in this conversation. You know much more about, the landscape out there.
This thing, put the topography out behind it, it's evident. Yeah.
Was here, so this is either done.
It still makes us run through that was flashier fuels, like that's kind of the grassland areas. And it's a slow stop.
Stop a fire.
But then as it moved along, basically where that road break was, it was much more slow. So this is the thing about this, is if you still have a landscape scale fire, it's still going to carry across the landscape. But where we place treatments can influence if it's going to be more or less severe, and it can slow pace, those can allow evacuation, and it's going to increase resilience. So, structures in the way are easier to defend, and then post fires and quickly becomes significant evacuation. So we always like to tell people, when we treat for fire, we're not treating to prevent fire. We're treating to invite low severity fire. It's going to burn. It's a matter of when that is. But if we treat it so burning just kind of carries the way it used to, that's not going to be the center we consider.
Structures in this central area. Of course, lots more can be done. We could get more detail, but just to give an idea, you do see some slow rates of spread. As well compared to.
You see it slows down quite a bit. Yeah, not every should go to very flow. So then into the trial. And then we'll show you one more here, again, from the power line. It's called ease.
Fuel types, fuel typing, elevation, as well as wind. We do not have specifics on the environmental conditions, thus RH temperature are put into more or less a very high category as the.
And so the reason we should do that fire treatment map and the simulation then show is just a really preliminary demonstration of this tool. And we really want to use this to you guys. And so we've been talking with Steve to actually bring out sim table. We'll do it on a sand table to show you real world demonstrations of fire carried across the landscape that we put in here. They were kind of just random hypothetical ones, like if we treat it here, but not actual treatments that we're proposing this carry.
So again, we do see a slight reduction in spread around those communities that we identify with the berry.
I'm kind of relaxed about her.
More than that area we just.
Oh no, we keep getting dropped from the call. Sorry, guys. Internet connection unstable. Yes, we'll share the link along with the presentation. Yeah. Yes, exactly. And here are these.
What's going on?
Yeah, exactly. And that's by Steve Graydon, the one who put together that one. Yeah. Yeah, so sorry, those of you on the Zoom call, we seem to keep getting dropped. But what we were saying is that the video we just showed, we will share the link with you guys as well as this whole presentation. So you can watch it again if the screen share had issue. All right.
Great, okay, so all of this leads into what you can do as a donor within the our community. So we need more participation. So I mean, at this time, we have 25 parcels that are willing to participate in this project out of 300 parcels that are within this community. So it's only 275 acres. So that's really not enough to make an impact on a landscape scale level. And so that challenges us in terms of the second phase of the grant rating process too, because we need to have a sense for just how many acres that we are proposing to treat. And so, and the concern there is that if you do write a grant with an amount, then maybe participants or landowners who will be interested later might say, oh, what about us? And then we just won't have the funding for them. So, yeah, exactly. So we're just really hoping to get as much interest as possible. So we're looking at you. Oh, yeah.
So I think maybe obvious, maybe not. So if this was the thing we went into the grant, then they're going to review it and the current point possible. Is that what you're saying?
Right.
That's just a little.
To an extent, I mean, the original proposal covers the whole community. But being a community-based project, we're also not going to propose treatments in the final plan if it's on a property that it's, someone's property who hasn't actually okayed
Oh,
it.
yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Did you send postcards out? I didn't have.
Oh, interesting. I wonder if there's, yeah, so I wonder if there's an issue with addresses.
Yeah, I have.
Okay.
Everybody get posted.
Mhm.
That's our slave owners. Some parking. Just ask this way to
Yeah.
keep the car.
Interesting.
Wow.
So I wonder if there's a mailing issue.
It kind of, one day, that's why I would work about that.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So this is great. This is something we'll also talk about is why we have still not much engagement in your suggestions for how to improve it. Yeah.
Yeah, the word free and neglected on top, on someone.
Just money.
So that's why.
Just send that out as a jury summons on I just said.
So that at the end of this, for this presentation, we'll be able to chat with you guys and brainstorm. We get suggestions like that are really helpful. Okay, so a lot of people didn't get the mailers. We need to take a look at the addresses, make it bolder.
Yeah.
Is there like a match of who did and didn't? Can you share who found out so that we can like?
There you go.
On the left here, this is Maiden Park JS. So this is the Jones Bar community in orange, and then Woolman is here in blue. And then this is just one proposed field break and TBD for the Jones Bar. And then these are the prescribed burn 8 acres here. And then to the right, it's a little bit messy, but all white. These are the parcels. So all 300 plus parcels here, and then the green and the yellow parcels, those are the ones where folks have said, yes, we want to participate. And so we're not trying to call anybody out, but it's just a visualization to show you, okay, like it's all scattered about too. And so trying to envision like getting contiguous land of, land folks engaged and getting a large scale treatment done and just seeing.
No, it's neighbors control enough to
Yeah,
do it pretty real.
pretty much. Because again, if you imagine the fire model that was showed up, giving mission over here, mission over here, treating just one parcel here, doesn't matter if the landscape scale. So really.
The car, I know, that could be unknown there.
Okay.
Oh, interesting.
I don't know. Okay.
So maybe this doesn't include everyone, but what is it?
People we've heard from.
Light blue and dark blue and yellow.
Right.
It's colored by different levels of interest.
Right. Yeah. So green are
Let's
willing to have us go each day. And then yellow is we're comfortable, we can self-assess our own property.
That's right. And he works for SSI. Not to call you out. Yeah.
And the parcels are not.
That's one of the questions that is hard to tell. I mean, we only have so much information from the county. We have, a mailing address and then a parcel number and parcel address. So some of the mailing addresses that don't match with the parcel address, we can sometimes assume, but it might that they don't occupy it. But sometimes there's also just mailing address. So it's hard to actually know if it's occupied or not. Exactly. No, that's a good point too. And that's one where, and maybe we should just be more clear on our outreach that, we want to work with the owner. So we need owner permission, so we can still contact the renter and tell them what we're doing.
Can I ask a question Jeff, about a proposed control area there on the map on the left? To do what we see, you need buy-in from every owner along that line, right?
Yep. Essentially.
Or the one control area that you're proposing, which is right there. So in other words, at this point in time, how many people along that line do you have permission to work with?
At this point in time, none that are maps, but then, yeah, we have Yuba Libre.
So none that are married.
Right, I would think that those would be the landowners that we would want to
Do
do.
you want to focus on that? Maybe focus.
You, one of your neighbors, did that was done, I got their permission, and so they're on the list.
Okay.
There's probably a couple that are off on our updated version, but it's still not, it's completely full.
So what we're saying as a group, I think, is really work on those
Yeah.
people.
Well,
Yeah, I'm saying,
Yeah.
it's personal that are high priority, like, let's do very individual outreach.
Sure.
so there's two.
Yeah, control.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's two kind of approaches and main things I want to point out here though too. This was just one proposed treatment, and part of it actually came from some of the original rate you guys had.
The one that's
Exactly. But really, you need to conduct more surveys, collect more data to actually come up with other suggested treatments. So that's the weird trade-off. We don't want to say that this is the only proposed treatment and just target that until we have more data across the landscape to then target the parcels that we do want to get involved with. So it's this weird cart before the horse thing. We actually need that data from various parcels to make a better assessment.
What portion of that is gonna be on inland?
we're talking about the control.
So you would be on here, yeah, so with that map, Jeff.
A lot of the feeling.
Oh, great, we can go back to that.
What was the question? I don't think I can mark this one, but again, let's share it after.
The question was, what is BLM land along the control?
BLM land is actually up here.
So it's not affected.
It's not, this is surrounding just the FireWise community.
That's all part of private property.
This is all private, and then the BLM land is outside of that.
Good.
Yeah, right.
Just to give you an idea about BLM land. 49 fiber came down the north side about here. If you showed everything down here. The only thing that saved my place up on how is the wind sheet, and then it went south to that ridge on the south side of Creek. If you look at that ridge, there's still trees that don't have any branches up 100 feet, you can green on top.
Yeah.
They made a big to-do about 3 or 4 months later about reseeding, aerial reseeding.
Yeah, that was amazing.
That's why if you look at that ridge now, it's a jungle.
Mm.
You can't walk through it.
Yeah.
If somebody could light a fire under BLM and get them to that ridge, it would be tremendous.
That's a,
Here's where the ridge you see it.
That
Yeah.
Jones Bar Fire got its own wind day out of day. It came from the magistrate's down in the southwest corner. We went down there and walked out the bottom side of the tree.
Yeah.
And it still took 5 hours to stop on. Fires,
yeah, no, the BLM component is an interesting one. I mean, as I think many people in this room probably know, they're stretched really thin. They don't really have the capacity, unfortunately, to do a lot of the thinning they need to do. A lot of projects that they've taken on for fuel reduction are actually now partnered with other nonprofits, like the Watershed Institute, ourselves. But we do have the contacts with them and their fuel specialists. And basically they're always on board for if we can bring the money in to say, hey, we can treat your land because the community wants it, they'll say, go ahead. They're always on board with. They definitely can be included, yeah.
Captain Field.
Yeah,
Good.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we did feel like BLM use the road every year.
Huh,
Is there,
yeah, it's right away.
interesting. I had no idea. Okay.
Yeah.
they have a lot of reason to come our partner with this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because they have done this like 20 years and it's gotten to be terrible. And
So they absolutely.
we're help.
Yeah, no, they absolutely can be included in the planning. Jerry, basically, if we just, pitch our plan, tell them what we're treating, where and why, they'll just sign off on it. So they're up for treatment as long as we bring in the funding. So,
Well, I mean, there's, many acres of BLM land that the gentleman was just referring to that's been receded. Where's that on the map? Let's see.
So the main deal, of course, is.
No. We're talking about.
There's Owl Creek Road on this map. Yeah, it's gonna be down here somewhere.
We just want to make sure that's in the video.
It's on.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, would you show us? Alan knows the map, well.
BLM in here.
Oh, good one.
Yeah, this is Compton Run, but these are BLM.
Okay, so this is me then, right?
That's it.
Okay. So then, yeah, look, this is BLM
At least they're going away.
and the whole road is BLM.
Judge,
Hmm?
I consider,
Here's both farmers. That's BLM.
well, you did. And if you all would have developed a really simple graphic or just an announcement that people could use to go talk to the neighbor that they know in their.
Yeah.
I think that might be a great way to try to bring people on board.
Absolutely.
Might be funding to do the work now in phase two.
Yeah.
It's a participating thing for. Yeah.
No, definitely. We have those flyers, we have those handouts, and so we can definitely work to get them to you. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting though, how many people didn't receive the original mailer, so that's also another step to fix. Yeah, no.
That's a sweet picture.
Okay, I like the idea of incredible, like, I'll just, yeah, we will do So, as I mentioned before, we're, well, in order to apply for funding, we need to know how much money we're asking for, right? And so we also need to know how many participants there are. And so we're at a bit of a standstill here, so that's where more participation is garnered. And then, so we're also going through more inventory, so right now, technician and I, we are the next few weeks, we'll be doing our forest inventories here, just to have more and more data to make more informed management decisions. And then ultimately, we'll be sharing the kind of data with you guys, creating synopsis just so that you understand what does this actually mean. And then there's this idea of this community toolkit that will be developed. And so hope is that, so with this treatment, you need to keep doing the treatments, right? Like it's not a one-off thing. It prescribed fires, if that's what's going to take place on your property, a good 5 to 10 years. You need to keep doing that. And so we want to give you guys the tools so that you can have some answered questions. So you'll know how to do inventories on your own properties. And you'll be able to know, okay, what does forest health look like? What is the structure of my forest land? What are some pathogens and diseases going on here? And then we can also address some other questions like how can you get funding in the future? And do we need to hire an RPF to do this? So we'll be creating a pretty comprehensive toolkit for you.
And then some of the community concepts in terms of maintenance and other projects, for post-treatment. Like she just said, treatments are not one and done. Every time you do a forest treatment, in a couple of years needs to be maintained. The big problem around here is a lot of our equipment is still contaminating the Scotch broom seed that you do a fuel clearance project, and then it's just Scotch broom in a couple of years, which is almost worse than if you didn't do the clearing. So the maintenance aspect is something that we're still working with a few partners kind of regionally to try to put together. So we've been in discussion with OES and the county about some options I think you guys will be hearing about, I think actually on the ballot coming up, related to some maintenance funds for fire treatment projects. And then also there's the Yuba Bear Burn Cooperative that some of you may have heard of, which is a group of volunteer prescribed burners who learn from each other and learn from experts in how to implement prescribed burns. And we're going to be engaging them as well to work with landowners to do small scale burning to maintain where treatments were applied. So really that's one of the hardest parts about forest treatment is maintenance. And so we're trying to work on kind of some of that post-treatment maintenance.
Timeline normally?
So this year, we're still working on data collection and permitting. So CAL FIRE is looking like it's probably going to be lead agency through what's called the VTP or vegetation treatment program. Yeah.
Exemption for removal of forest products or biomass or for timber, we can actually do a sale. Then try to get a secret exemption and speed it up faster.
Which they're kind of going through some assessment of right
Yeah.
now. And then the permitting process, Erin has been taking care of a lot of that with some partners like Kevin Whitlock, which you know, again, he's a local regional professional forester doing archaeological surveys, this kind of thing. So permitting is kind of what happens in the background, but then we still need more data to complete the planning process. And so really when we talk about proposed treatments, like we've said this before, our approach again is community based, where we don't want to tell you guys where we're going to treat the land. We want to show you guys the data, show you proposed treatments, what might work and what might not, and then have you guys come to consensus across your landscape, what makes the most sense. So that proposed treatment so far was a prior recommended fuel break. There's some spots that we're going to be identifying for increasing heterogeneity, doing ladder fuel treatments, and creating gaps here and there. But in the end, it's going to be kind of a community vote is really the idea here. We don't want to tell you how to manage your land. We're going to give data and suggestions and have you guys come to that decision kind of on your own. What would you guys like to see done? So I think that's kind of the context for shifting over to a discussion now is, yeah, we didn't want to cut off the discussion of increased outreach because that's basically why we're here is to talk more ideas on outreach, how to increase engagement, but then also to start the discussion now that you've seen kind of at the landscape scale how fire might move through and where we do have data from. And you even start talking about some of these proposed treatments that you guys may have had in mind, you know, other properties that you're aware of that have prior fuel buildup that needs to be addressed, or ingress egress routes that really need to be addressed from your perspectives.
What's the target amount of acreage that you're looking to have for implementation?
That's a really good question. Because I have my own conversations ongoing with partners with the BLM and grantors where the implementation acreage is always kind of a, you know, grantors and agencies, when they talk about implementation acreage, they're saying actual ground touched. For us, we are looking at, you know, we can treat at the 3,000 acre scale through strategic placement of treatments. So our acreage is actually probably going to be a little bit smaller, but for addressing fire propagation across all 2,000 acres.
Yeah, I'm actually curious what you think the numbers of acres would be in shooting. We have for.
Yes. So the original amount in the for phase 1 was 600 acres. Yeah. Yeah.
And if we take those out, what are your recommended please for this neighborhood?
I don't actually know. We didn't actually fully split that out by just neighborhood versus school. We were just looking collectively, kind of an estimate across all 5 property types. Yeah. Yeah.
How many acres on Woodland region is that, are we just counting the whole parcel?
So far, we just have the 8 proposed from Steve Braden. And then we just need to complete the inventories and then actually analyze the data. And then we'll be able to look at and make written recommendations, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, because we're not going to propose treatments or no till acreage until we actually have the data on what needs to be treated right away. So.
So you see, took that treatment, then took that quite what are the sort of scope of the treatments?
That's a great question. So treatment types can vary. So I mean, one of the most common one that we recommend only is kind of a around roads and in certain case scenarios is mastication. So that's, you know, different implementers can come in basically and just grind up all vegetation in certain areas. We, you know, most data shows that
Your
mastication.
phone's been going crazy.
Oh, what was that?
Close the door.
Did you say again?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. I wanted to ask a question and make a comment when there's an opportunity.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, give me 1 second. There's a
No,
couple of
no.
comments in the chat I'll read out too.
It's fine.
Yeah, so most of the data from application-based treatment shows that basically, you know, we grind up that material, especially if it's things like manzanita, which we have a lot around here. It'll actually smolder and carry fire longer. It can actually transmit fire quickly, even though it's a low ground fire. But it's really good for fuel breaks, for agency access again, to build fire lines. But it's not a treatment that we recommend kind of again at landscape scale. It's more like areas where you want to just get acreage, get stuff out of the way, and then look at either replanting or some other sort of post-treatment. So we usually would pair mastication with like a prescribed burn after mastication. Then there's going to be hand thinning, and that's probably going to be one of the more common treatments, depending on topography and parcels that are involved. So it's actually coming out and selecting trees above or below certain size and just cutting them, removing them. And then what we do with that material is always a big question. So some of it, some of it can be chipped, or we can work with some biomass facilities to get it transferred there. But that's one of the big limitations on the more material you remove, the harder it is to implement because it's harder to get rid of some of the material. So hand thinning, mastication, and then there is mechanical thinning as an option, which is mechanical thinning is mastication counts as that, but it's coming in and doing actual large timber removal. That one's one of the hardest to implement right now because there's nowhere for the wood to go. Mills are at capacity, so some other projects and folks are working on to get mills going up and running locally to get rid of the material that needs to be removed from the landscape. But those are the three primary treatments, and then prescribed burning is also a type of treatment. So if it's an area that can take a burn, we might pre-treat or recommend pre-treatment. So do some hand thinning, do some application, and then do a burn. Yeah.
And
So on the Zoom call, what was your question?
Oh, thank you. I did put it in the chat. I'm the green parcel that's just to the east of the eastern boundary, but we're supposed to be part of the FireWise community. Anyway, no, on that one. And so, we'd love to participate. One of the issues that we're seeing is a lot of drought/beetle killed ponderosa pines. And I wondered if there's a way to address those. I guess that's the thinning that you're talking about, perhaps.
did you say beetle kill?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll restate the question comment so everyone can hear. Achieve the eastern parcel is supposed to be part of the FireWise community. So I think we need to update our boundary. Okay. So I wonder if we should update our boundary.
And there's people killed everywhere.
Yeah. So the comment, was on just the large number of trees experiencing drought-induced and beetle-induced mortality, and will those be addressed? Absolutely. So it's actually another area where there's permitting exemptions for treatment. Is basically removal of hazard trees, removal of dead trees because of beetle kill and drought kill. And there's multiple ways to get funding for that, either individually or again through this project. Yes, well, yes and no. It can be included in this as basically one of the exemptions for certain kinds of treatment. And then there's also other funding sources available for hazard tree removal. And people don't like the term, but they call it sanitation for if you have a bark beetle outbreak. So basically remove brood trees and stop that outbreak from propagating. Because one of the things that's really interesting about bark beetle, and this is a little bit of a digression, but this is what my research is, is that when we have bark beetle induced mortality, what you're seeing is basically a result of invasion and bark beetle damage and drought induced weakening of trees from many years prior. So if you're seeing an outbreak now, you can expect trees around that outbreak to probably be dying within the next 10 years or so. We usually get a 10-year mortality lag. So we definitely need to look at areas where you're seeing bark beetle outbreak as way ahead of that is where you need to start thinking about treatment to slow down that bark beetle propagation. Yeah, that happens a lot too. People can masticate and then there's mechanical damage to the trees and they'll end up dying next year. Yeah.
When we got that grant from Cal, back then it was a little more strict, because they wanted 12 feet off the ground, 2 years.
Exactly.
And it was like, and it's not taking long, but that did get tight for 49, right? That's what folks, Pine Woodland is now calling it.
Yeah.
And it would have been more fun to have that piece of okay, right, got easier to do let's do medication line and do some burn. But fire, no way.
Yeah.
So it's everything get rid of everything, but it is an issue. We were kind of prescribed burn and it lit. Those the chips are kind of big. They just get lit.
Yeah. And then, yeah, what we see a lot in a lot of these higher severity fires, like portions of the 49er, is that type conversion to manzanita. And that's when we get this high severity begets high severity cycle, where when it converts to manzanita, and then just then carry hot fire after that. So it's unless you get in kind of after high severity and mitigate some of that manzanita regrowth, it's just going to keep carrying hot fire. Yeah, so absolutely, that's the other point you guys have brought up. The bark beetle kill. Like I said, this grant being funded through Wildlife Conservation Board, it means focused on forest health overall, not just fuels treatment. Absolutely, that's a component that we're including as well. We're including projected drought severity across the entire treatment area, biological resources, basically, all of the various types of data that can tell us about what's the future forest health expected to be in this region, both with and without treatment, and that can help us target some of our treatments, not just for fire, but maybe there's just an area that's looking really unhealthy and needs a little bit of help in terms of getting cleared out for bark beetle. And the one last comment on that is, where some of the exemptions come from for treatment for dead trees is, dead trees are fuel. Look at the creek fire down in Southern Sierra, that was all in the, mass mortality area of Sierra National Forest from bark beetle drought, and that just carried crown fire across. So absolutely, any areas of concentrated mortality would be addressed. But then there's some areas where if it's not a hazard tree, not a bark beetle induced kill, maybe we'd actually leave it for wetland habitat. So there's kind of pros and cons of choosing which snags you remove or leave, depending on the fuel, structure around those trees. That would definitely go through planning as well, but we need that data first before we can actually make those assessments. And that's where getting on the ground into all these individual parcels, collecting data, carrying it with our remote sensing data allows us to get a better idea of what to treat where.
So thank you for sharing that information with us. That's info that we like to get from you.
Yeah, and then there's
You're welcome. Yeah, we've watched. It's the die-off started on the parcel below us, and it's just marching up the hill.
Yeah.
So the tools you're talking about and helping us landowners to take care of the forest and to access funds for hazard tree removal are very much appreciated. And we, on Monte Vista, we have a road meeting coming up. One of the other, Luann Myers is here. She lives on Monte Vista too. And we'd be happy to share. We've shared about this meeting, but we'd also be happy to share if there's if somebody says, oh yeah, I totally want to do that. Should they email Erin? Should they, what would you recommend?
Yes, so we have, again, there's a little handout that we sent out. We'll make sure to do a kind of an email blast as well. And yeah, there's a comment saying since it's so challenging to hear on the Zoom, could you write out how to sign up? We'll do another blast out of basically how you can sign up if you haven't already, as well as contact information for any neighbors and community members that you may know that maybe haven't responded. But yeah, basically what we're doing is it is a voluntary sign up where you reach out to us either via phone call, email, and then once you are on our list, you will receive a survey from Erin that basically can tell us what level of involvement you would like to have. So for those of you who have signed up and taken the survey or not seen the survey, it's basically it tells us which parcel is yours, size, any information on like prior treatments, and then really just what level of access you would like to give. Everything from, I'm interested, but I don't necessarily want you on my property. I'm interested and I can help you collect data, or I'm interested and please come do whatever inventories you would like to do. So we really want to make sure that you guys are comfortable with whatever we're doing on your properties, or you can help us collect the data as well. So yes, we'll share that contact information.
Yes. We just have to do a couple of blocks and it's pretty fun. I don't know, but if you want to step outside and just check out some trees with us, more than welcome.
Yeah, of course you do. Is that person following this on Nancy?
This is Linda. Is that you, Linda, right? Linda Escleman, is that how you say it? Escleman. Yeah, and then Susan Hopkins as well.
But they are.
They are. Okay. Yeah, no, we'll definitely update it. And that's why we have done outreach to some of the parcels just beyond the boundary of it too. So it's not necessarily just that boundary. There's adjacent parcels as well that received mailers or have been reached out to. So.
Everybody who's in this room currently, like, communicating, I need to, by the way. Has there in this room communicated to me or Erin previously prior to this meeting that they're interested in this?
It's a survey. No, it is.
Okay. But no, that's good to know, so we could make sure, like, at least we can make sure everybody in this
Absolutely.
is dialed into this.
And we'll share it with you in the Zoom room as well. Make sure you get your information.
She already.
Okay.
Thank you so, Linda. Yeah. But yeah, just, no. And then I'll send you a survey and I will be on the list.
Yeah, or, yeah, I can get information, and I'm also curious if you can like, what would we skip can we just go straight to the passing of this survey? And just skip the middle section of just, like, I think one of the effective strategy is just minimizing how much back and forth Georgian goes. So instead of contacting me to let me know that one are interested to them to our survey, like, can't we just blast this survey out to everybody and just see who fills it out and just as opposed to just.
Was there big meetings?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, that'd be great. And then if we do send out a postcard mailer, brings to the ditch, we'll link on there.
Absolutely. And if you find out that the postman survey are able to be.
That was the other question is we kind of curious from you, we know that all properties out here have various levels of internet access. So has that been an issue for anyone to interact with the survey that we have in its current?
People.
Yeah, that's what we figured.
So it's kind of good.
Yeah. So probably print it out and then do the tape it to a gate. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
No.
Just a comment, I have a neighbor who doesn't do the internet, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All of our neighbors are participating.
So if you found out if you missed people in the postcard, and some of us might volunteer, I'd rather do it with 2 people. We could take 8 or 10 houses with their spot and just go up on the house and then go, hi, I'm your neighbor, you're not neighbor.
Take it to people's gates or so forth, and just like personalize something on the outside of the envelopes, they don't think that the gate numbers or something.
Yeah.
We could do that at our road meeting. We could, if we could get a hard copy, we could do that at our road meeting.
What was that?
Yeah. I said, if we could get a hard copy of the survey, like people are talking about, we could make copies and hand it out at our road meeting on Wednesday.
It's on Wednesday. Okay.
Because we have all the property owners, well, a good portion of the property owners. Most of them have internet access. I know of at least one who doesn't, and he's my neighbor, so I can hand him one.
Yeah, but she said if we get a hard copy of the survey, she has their road meeting is coming up on Wednesday. That's all of the property owners.
I could just email Erin, and I don't know if I know it's an electronic survey and it was really easy to do.
Yes.
But I don't know if you can print it out and send it to me, or
Yeah, absolutely.
I can
Erin
email you. I can email you, Erin, and
Yeah, Erin will actually be out here doing surveys at Wilmette this week. So maybe you can, when you come out to do those surveys, we'll have maybe a flyer drop off. And then we can do some of the canvassing that way.
I'll send it to you, right?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So we'll definitely get you some surveys for that meeting, and then we'll get some hard copies out here to be able to distribute.
And you said Wednesday, right?
Yes.
So if we leave it here for you, then we could just catch it.
Should be good.
Sure, I can come pick them up. Yeah,
Okay.
Awesome.
Yeah, great. Let's coordinate via email that, so that I know.
Okay. Okay, thank you so much.
Let's move to the contact case. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I just want to clarify that it's Jones Bar FireWise Community at email.
Oh.
In the bottom. No, that's said, his email address.
Maybe change that for the now.
Yes.
I think on the handout, this is the email. Yeah, so really at this point, it's still just kind of open for any other suggestions on outreach, any questions or comments about that. And then really, like we said, any other, from your knowledge and perspectives, any trouble points that, in this landscape that you really would like to see addressed that we haven't been able to see yet. So we know about the ridge and the replanting area, the dead trees out there.
All, there's like 35 acres.
Yeah.
Right on the corner, and be great to do something with that.
Yeah,
I would have come back to the corner, it's right in front of my house, and I got a carrot myself, 200 feet out into it around my fence, my carrots. I mean, I'm working on it all the time, and I'm like one man show, it takes time.
yeah,
But I'm with you, I do it all the time, I don't know why the ZLN land would oppose that.
Yeah.
It'd be great.
that they wouldn't at all. Yeah, they're on board because they just don't have the people. So if we bring the money in, it's then we can treat.
In any sense, like, why can't we just go onto the property?
Oh, I
I want to reclaim from all the roads to my property and just, I like, see, I will take care of it if that can just, we talk to Liz about it. We have any, I don't know.
I don't just want to all control it and do it every year. She said, whoa. She said, go ahead and do it, but I don't want to hear it.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of the.
Yeah, you go down Mount Creek and the first left starting down, and the second driveway I was left is Myers Place out of mine. I'm right back in the corner by the vineyard there.
Yeah, so that's one of those things where private landowners, yeah, it's kind of like a don't ask, don't tell from them. But from our, yeah, to do a larger scale treatment, we do have to go through the permanent process with them. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Because they chopped up down the reason. Do they have any funding or?
Yeah.
And the responsibilities?
It's an interesting thing because basically their fuel management is focused strictly on canal access.
I'm sorry.
Maybe we'll yeah. Yeah. They have right of way just around the canals, yeah.
And you still have just walk home and just walk.
Yeah. Yeah, so for those of you in the Zoom, unfortunately, I apologize. And sorry you guys can't be here, but just because we're having more of an open discussion now, we're gonna go ahead and end the call. But we'll share the recording with the email list. We'll share the video and the fire model that we mentioned, and then we'll follow up with any other contact information so we can still stay in touch with you guys. And thank you so much for coming and for agreeing to pass out that flyer.
Thank you for being here and offering the Zoom. Appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. So definitely stay in touch and reach out, and we will be in touch with all of you guys. Thanks so much.
Thank you.